Population is defined as the inhabitants of a particular region, such as a town, country, or continent. Geographers study where population is distributed and why. The world's current population is about 7.2 billion. In the US, the population census is taken every 10 years to determine changes in population. About 50% of the world's population lives in urban areas. This is a change. For most of history, humans tended to live in rural areas. 95% of the world's population lives on 5% of the Earth's surface. This is called the ecumen. Population tends to cluster around resources such as water and fertile land. The world's population is clustered in 4 main areas: South Asia, East Asia, Southeast Asia, and Western Europe. About 80% of the world's population lives in LDCs. The only countries with a population more than 1 billion are China and India. Even though China has a bigger population, India has a greater NIR, and its population is expected to surpass China's by 2030. Population density is categorized 3 main ways. Arithmetic density is the number of people in a given region divided by the amount of land. Physiological density is the number of people in a region divided by the amount of total arable or farmable land. Agricultural density is the number of farmers divided by the amount of total arable land. To analyze population, geographers look at population pyramids. A population pyramid is a visual representation of the age and sex of population. Population pyramids are divided into age-sex cohorts. The cohorts are usually at 5-year intervals with males on the left side and females on the right. Population pyramids help determine the dependency ratio of a particular region. The dependency ratio is the number of people who cannot work to people who can work. Population policies. China's one-child policy began in the 1980s with the Communist Party setting a goal to keep China's population below 1.2 billion by the end of the 1900s. China's ethnic minorities are exempt, but those who are not and have a second child must pay a special fee to cover the extra cost of health care and education. Parents who have had a girl first or are only children themselves may have 2 kids. The Cairo Plan was a series of recommendations for stabilizing world population agreed upon at the UN International Conference on Population and Development in September of 1994. The plan calls for improved health care and family planning services for women, children, and families throughout the world, and also emphasizes the importance of education for girls. Pro-natalist policies encourage people to have more kids through incentives, for example, France, Russia, Mongolia, and Estonia. Anti-natalist policies encourage people to have less kids, such as China and India. Eugenics is the ideology that only a certain group of people should be allowed to reproduce because they are superior to others. Thomas Malthus. In 1798, Thomas Malthus published an essay on the principle of population. In his essay, he warned people that food supply grew at an arithmetic or linear rate, while population grew at an exponential rate or J-curve. Eventually, humans would outgrow the Earth's carrying capacity. The point at which the population would outgrow the food supply is called a crisis point or Malthusian catastrophe. Malthus declared that the only things that kept the human population in check were famine, disease, and war. If these things failed to occur often enough to keep the population in check, the world's population would collapse from deficiency in food supply. Famous critics of Malthus include Milton Friedman, Adam Smith, Esther Boserup, and Julian Simmons. They argue that Malthus did not predict that technological advances would increase food production. Instead of growing at a linear rate, this is how food supply actually grew. Malthus also assumed that humans would always have as many children as possible. However, as the country develops, many people decide to have fewer children. New Malthusians include Paul Ehrlich, John Maynard Keyes, and E.A. Wrigley. They argue that per capita demand is increasing, and natural resource depletion is also increasing. The demographic transition model. Geographers use the demographic transition model to determine how developed a country is according to the state of its population. CBR is the crude birth rate, or the number of live births per 1,000 people. CDR is the crude death rate, or the number of deaths per 1,000 people. TFR is the total fertility rate, or the number of children a typical female will have in her childbearing years, often related to fecundity. NIR is the natural increase rate, which is calculated by subtracting CDR from CBR. Doubling time is the number of years it will take a given population to double. Life expectancy is the number of years a newborn child is expected to live. This is a map of life expectancies in different countries in the world. Life expectancy is part of the measure of a state's HDI. Replacement rate is the number of children a couple need to have in order to replace themselves or keep the population the same when they die. In MDCs, the replacement rate is usually 2.1, 2 for each parent and the extra for accidents or other things that might happen to the couple's children. In LDCs, the replacement rate is generally higher because of high mortality. Stage 1 is high stationary. There's a high CBR because lots of children are needed for farm work. There's a high CDR because diseases and unreliable food supply, and there's a low NIR. The population pyramid looks like a sloped triangle. Stage 2 is early expanding. There's a high CBR because lots of children are still needed for farm work. There's a declining CDR because of improvements in food storage, sanitation, and medical care, and there's a rapidly increasing NIR. Stage 2 came to current MDCs through the Industrial Revolution, and it came to current LDCs through the Medical Revolution. Stage 3 is late expanding. There's a declining CBR because of low MIR, and women's empowerment leads to less children, declining CDR because of further improvements in healthcare, and the NIR slows down. The thickness of the population pyramid moves up as the population ages. Stage 4 is low stationary. There's a low CBR because of even lower IMR and women's empowerment, and low CDR because of good healthcare. The NIR is stable and low. The population pyramid might look like a rectangle or a trapezoid. Stage 5, declining, low CBR because of even less children and often out-migration, low CDR because of good healthcare, and the NIR is negative or 0. This is the point of zero population growth, or ZPG. CBR, NIR, IMR, and TFR are all good indicators of a country's development. However, CDR is not, because in MDCs there is usually a large percentage of elderly people, which means a large number of people who will soon die. The demographic equation for the world population is new population equals old population plus births minus deaths. The demographic equation for a region's population is new population equals old population plus births minus deaths plus immigrants minus emigrants. Epidemiology. Epidemiology is a branch of medicine in which the incidence, distribution, and possible control of diseases and other factors relating to health are. An endemic is constantly present at low incidence in a specific population, such as the common cold or malaria. An epidemic has an unusually high incidence in a specific population, such as the smallpox epidemic in New England or yellow fever in Philadelphia. An endemic for one region may be an epidemic for another region because it is normal for one place and not for the other. A pandemic is a worldwide epidemic, such as the 1918 flu pandemic or the Black Plague. This is the epidemiological transition model. Stage 1 is the age of pestilence and famine. People went from being hunter-gatherers to sedentary farmers, and this created an environment where diseases could spread easily. Infectious diseases are spread by vectors or from host-to-host contact. A vector can be an insect or body fluid such as mucus. Diseases are mostly due to unhygienic food storage, animal attacks, infections, and water contamination. Examples of diseases during stage 1 include the Black Plague and malaria. Stage 2 is the age of receding pandemics. The average life expectancy at birth increased from about 30 to 50 years because of standard of living and sanitation improved. Epidemic peaks became less frequent. People were moving to the cities for jobs because of the Industrial Revolution, so pandemics were still a problem. Examples include cholera, studied by John Snow, polio, and measles. Stage 3 is the age of degenerative and man-made diseases. People started living long enough for age-related diseases to occur and chronic diseases to emerge. There is a rising cost of health care. Examples include Alzheimer's disease and diabetes. Stage 4 is delayed degenerative diseases. Technological advances are allowing people with degenerative diseases to live longer. Examples include cancer and heart disease. Stage 5 is a return of stage 1. Pathogens evolve to become resistant to antibiotics and drugs and come back stronger and with worse effects. Examples include the avian bird flu and HIV/AIDS.